It's a privilege to be here. John asked me a few weeks ago if I would do this, and I said, "Oh, I don't know, John, if I can handle that or not." A few disclaimers. Because of the ALS, which I encountered, I have a little trouble speaking, and there's some hesitation, and not to mention my memory, so bear with me a little bit. I was just thinking, coming up, can everybody hear? Yeah. Can you hear Gillian? Okay, got it. That better? Okay. Tom, can you hear?
Yes.
Oh boy. If Tom can hear, we can about so, I was thinking coming out here, I think I've been a member of Kiwanis 55 years, maybe something like that. So I've seen a lot of good things that
Hold that well toward your mouth, Dick.
yeah,
Thank you.
I will try.
Try to keep it.
Just like Elvis, okay?
Okay. All right, now can you hear better? Okay. Do you want me to tell the joke again?
No.
Well, I don't know. There's some IU people in it. They're a little slow. I'll talk slowly, Ron, so you don't miss anything. Not to mention Joe. There's a welcome, Joe. We're glad to get you out here. Good to have you. Yes, John, what do you want me to talk about? He says, "Oh, talk about yourself." Well, it's a little difficult for me to do. A year ago, just right now, I was diagnosed with ALS. That is not good. It's terminal. They gave me 6 months or 6 years. I've surpassed 6 months now, so we're okay. It affects lots of things. You can tell. I'm a little shaky with my right arm. My left arm, I can't move at all, and my legs are just noodles. And by the way, those were good noodles for lunch. I would prefer your noodles to mine. But I'm 87 years old and have had a great life, and so we make the best of what's dealt to us. So ALS is non-curable. I'm sure you've heard of some famous baseball player that had ALS. What was his name, Tanner?
Lou Gehrig.
Oh, okay. You probably have seen his final speech at Yankee Stadium. Well, he spoke about being the luckiest guy in the world, and I consider myself the luckiest guy in the world also, because I've had a great life and a lot of things. A lot of people have helped make it, and I'd like to first of all recognize my parents. They came through the Depression and got forced out to Kiwanis, Indiana, to start farming with my mother's uncle. My dad had no experience whatsoever. He was an 8th grade dropout, which back then that was not unusual. My mom did graduate from Gary High School, and my dad went to work in the steel mills, and that's where they met. Well, anyway, they because of their experience being in the Depression, no jobs, there was no free meals at that time out in the country for sure. So you had to find a relative to live with, and my folks lived with my mom's aunt and uncle for at least one winter. Then I guess my dad had a few skills that my uncle could develop in farming, so he was invited to stay another year because the farm across the road went up for rent. And so that's how my folks got into farming and how I got interested in it, being raised around it. But I say I'm lucky because the work ethic that they had for being through the Depression, I'm sure was a benefit to me on down the line. I got to give credit also to a teacher at Rochester High School named Harry Ray, who about 6 weeks into my senior year, he grabbed me in the hall, and back then you could be grabbed. And he says, "Belcher, what are you going to do when you graduate?" I said, "Well, the Korean War was on." I said, "I'll probably enlist in the Army." And he said, "No, you're not. You're going to Purdue University." That's the first time I even had any idea about going to college. And so he checked out my curriculum, what I'd taken. He found out, first of all, I needed chemistry. He taught chemistry, so that gave me a leg up when he transferred me into his class and put me with the smartest girl in the class as my lab partner. So Ellen Foster carried me for almost 9 months. But he got me signed up at Purdue and got me a scholarship from Sears and Roebuck for $200. And next thing I knew, I was being dumped out on campus. I'd been there one time before, but so that's how I became a Boilermaker. My fraternity has been very, very instrumental in the people that I met there and still have friends with. And it was a great contribution to my background. So that is how I got to Purdue, and it's been a great asset. My wife, who I met there, and we spent 57 years together, and she was always a great supporter of me and things that I got involved in. I remember my college roommate and the best man in our wedding, Joe Hassler, encouraged me to start a bank in Rochester, Indiana. At that time, there were 2 banks, Farmers and Merchants and First National Bank. It was a standard thing out on the street. If you wanted to borrow money from them, you had to prove that you didn't need it. Literally. My dad had a few comments about that. Joe kept encouraging me to start a bank. You need to start a bank. He was quite an entrepreneur himself. I had past experience in entrepreneurship, and so I kind of looked at it as a challenge. When my dad found out that I was interested in this, he wasn't very happy. I had 2 little kids at that time, and Suzanne taught school, so that kind of got the bread and butter for a while. And but he thought it was pretty crazy, as did Brownie of Rochester Glass. After I bought the Joe Ewing. Oh man, there's Joe Ewing right there. So, bought his grocery store. I won't tell you how much I paid for it. Well, the front part was already leased to Hearts After Mark's Union, but the back part was open, and so that's where we went and started there in 1966, January the 3rd. And I remember getting dressed that morning, January 3rd, putting on a tie and a suit, because that's what bankers did, you know. You got to look like you know something. So I thought, I'm going to have to do this forever. And, well, it was only 25 or 30 years that we did it. And then we got all casual like these guys sitting around here. Todd's got a white shirt. You got a tie?
Plenty of ties.
Okay.
Just can't wear them.
Okay. So, anyway, to go back to Brownie, there was a door, a window in that back room, and so I called Brownie to come down. I said, I'd like to have this so you can slide it open. And he said, well, what for? I said, well, I want to put a drive-up window. He says, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. Well, back then there weren't any drive-ups. So we had one of the first around. We had a parking lot, and the banks didn't have a parking lot downtown, and so it kind of gave us a little leg up on things. I remember very distinctly our first customer on that morning. We had put an ad in the paper that we were going to be open, and this was Pearl Pontius. She had a nursing home, and she opened the door, and I could see her. Yes, she stuck her head in and saw this young punk sitting there with a tie and a coat that he didn't like, and she says, "Is this a bank?" I said, "Oh yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. It sure is." So that was our first customer. Also learned early on, you got to put up a good show. That our parking lot was gravel, and one morning, one afternoon or evening, I should say, we had about 2 inches of snow. So that morning, when I went to work, I parked in my usual parking place, and at 10 o'clock, our first customer came in, and he said, "Oh, well, I see I'm the first customer." "Well, how'd you know that?" "Well, there weren't any tracks in the parking lot." So from then on, anytime we had a skiff of snow, when I came to work, I parked in every slot on it. So it looked like we were really busy. That's kind of like when you get a phone call, let it ring a few times and make them think you're busy. But not now, don't let it ring, Tanner. So one of the other first things that we did is when we opened up our Mishawaka office, we made it a green, LEED certified facility. I think to this day we're still the only bank branch that is entirely green. And I got to give credit to Suzanne and my daughter Cynthia. They were very green, and when we were talking about opening this branch in Mishawaka, Cindy said, "Well, if we're going to do it, we're going to make it green." And one of my astute board members said, "I don't like green." Thought we were going to paint it green. Now, for you IU people, I'll explain that after the meeting. So we've been very successful because of the communities. Every community that we're in, and we have 6 locations. We urge our people to be involved in the community. We urge them to give back to the community, whether it's their talents or monetary or whatever, because we want to be good citizens, and we've tried to do that in Fulton County. I also had great encouragement from my wife. She was a real trooper all the way along to make sure we supported various things that we were really interested in. And fortunately, the bank has done very well financially, and we are stockholders, of course, and that's another story. When we organized, we could not be a stock company. We had to be a mutual savings and loan. Oh, yeah. Then they changed the regulations that we could convert to stock. We, First Federal Savings and Loan of Fulton County, were the first savings and loan in the state of Indiana to convert to stock. My peers, I go to bank meetings and they'd say, "You're converting to stock? You're crazy." And I didn't think I was, but maybe. But anyway, that was another one of the things. Now, there are very, very few stock or mutual banks left in the state of Indiana, or nationally for that matter. But so yeah, those are several things that we've been successful at, and appreciate all of the support that we have gotten from the community. The various communities. Our first branch was in Winnemac, and it's been there 40 years. We've had banks in Bremen and Plymouth. Both of those have been there about 40 years also. We have lots of our people. We have now 150 employees throughout the various locations that we have, and it's just been a great experience. And we over the years, our mission statement basically is the golden rule. You know, do unto others that you would like to be done unto, and that'll get you a long ways. And also with your fellow employees, your fellow working together. You know, how do you want to be treated, John? You've been with us 25 years. Boy, we're slow learners then.
You weren't very swift back then.
Oh, I think I'm going to get done here. Well, John, we saved him from some other place. So.
Credit you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we've always tried to give good service and keep up from a technology standpoint. You know, the banking business is like most business. It has just changed immensely. You know, so much is online now. So much is so different than when we started. We use ledger cards And when you came in and made a $10 deposit to your savings account, we got the ledger card out and a sharp pencil and put it in there. Paid interest quarterly, and back then, passbooks paid 5%, and it was regulated by the government, believe it or not. They told commercial banks what they could pay. They told savings and loans what they could pay. So then we kind of got cute in the business that we'd compound a quarterly, and then it became, well, first of all, it was annual, then it was quarterly, then it was monthly, and then it became daily. Well, you get your calculator out and try to figure that out when we didn't have any calculators, but you could buy these charts, cheat charts that would tell you $100 what it earned at 5% daily. So, and that was compounded. So that business has changed a lot. And so what I like to do now is open it up for some questions or comments that you might have, whether it's banking, farming. Suzanne was raised on a farm in Benton County. She's always was interested in farming. I was raised on farming, and I soon figured out, though, if you wanted to be warm in the winter and cool in the summer, get an office job. Because those tractors back then had no cabs or, of course, no air conditioning, which that has changed. Any comments or questions?
Would you just touch briefly on your service, being in the Army?
Okay, yeah, thank you for bringing, I see you got the VA guy speaking next week. When I was diagnosed, and our son is an MD in Indianapolis, so he kind of knows his way around. And I went to IU Health Neurology first, and it was they never was really sure, as they said, because there's some things that might deviate away from it, but they said right then, they said you should look at VA. Well, they found out I was a veteran. I graduated from Purdue in ROTC, as an officer, and ended up as in artillery at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, in the 101st Airborne. Now, 101st Airborne, just last night I saw some soldiers over in Afghanistan, a screaming eagle on their shoulder, or on their sleeve. That's 101st Airborne. They've been around forever. And their competitor, their IU, I guess, would be the 82nd Airborne. But I got married when I was down there, and Suzanne had graduated from Purdue in speech and hearing therapy. And so I've always been kind of mercenary, whatever, but interested in the Bucks. So I told Susanna, I said, well, if you get a job teaching, we'll get married. So she was pretty naive, and she agreed to that. So I go on post to the superintendent of schools. Now, Fort Campbell, Kentucky, lots of people there, and schools, very good schools. So I go into the superintendent, and I said, my fiance is graduating from Purdue, has graduated. She'd be interested in the job. Do you have anything available? And he said, yep. And there was dead silence. I was waiting on him to say, well, could she come down, such and such? I said, well, what should she do? Tell her to be here August 25th, that's when school starts. No interview, no background check or anything. So that worked out pretty good, you know. I was second lieutenant, making officer's pay, and being in the airborne, you got jump pay. That was an extra $110 a month. Ooh. I became what they call a pay jumper. You had to jump at least once a month to get paid that 110. So I would volunteer and make sure that happened. So, but that never saw any combat outside it. They sent the 101st to Little Rock, Arkansas. If some of you older people remember when there was forced integration, and they sent the troops down there with fixed bayonets, ushering these kids into school. And you know, it's just unbelievable, but that's what happened. What else you want to know?
Well, that's good. Thank you.
Other comments? Okay, Philip.
Dick, I've been in the banking world for 12 years and retired out of it, but, and I know the difference, but would you go ahead and explain to them the difference between a credit union and a state bank?
National Bank and State Bank.
It doesn't matter.
Okay, credit unions, first of all, they're all mutuals. There's no stockholders. They have certain government leeway that commercial banks don't. And that goes back into the Depression when a lot of factories established credit unions. And the factory personnel ran them. In other words, you could do a check off with your salary that you were paid. It went to the credit union, and then if you wanted to buy a car, you could go in there and borrow money from them. It was pretty much designed for the working class to be able to get credit. Like I mentioned about our local banks, you had to prove that you didn't need the money before you could get it. So back then, the credit unions had a great impact on the community, and it used to be that if you were a General Motors credit union, you had to work for General Motors. If you're a teacher's credit union, you had to be in that business. Well, that soon got out of control, and like the Farm Bureau Credit Union, you could belong to it if you ever eaten food or teacher's credit. Did you ever see a school bus? Yeah, I saw one. Okay, come on. Now you're getting a little taint from me. Thank you, Philip.
Dick, correct me if I'm wrong, or Evan, you can. Credit unions do not pay FIT tax, is that right?
Ooh, man. Yeah, they have a lot of tax advantage.
Yeah.
They do not pay any income tax, and we in the banking business scream, "Hey, that's unfair. We're paying 40%. They're paying nothing." So they can pay 1% more on their CDs, or they can loan car money at 1% less than us. Well, that's not quite right, but they pay no tax. Okay, we got to get off credit unions now. Other comments?
Yeah. You know, when we were first starting our business, the antiques, we'd go to an auction and I'd be bidding, my wife would be bidding another auction somewhere else. So I went to a bank, one of the banks in town that's no longer there, and said, I need to set up a line of credit because I don't know what she's doing. This is pre-cell phone days. And they said, that's fine, we can set this up for you, but what are you gonna use the money for? And I said, well, what do you mean? So we would have to pre-approve your use of the line of credit. I said, so if I want to spend $10,000 on a doll, that's what I asked the man. I said, you're going to approve it? And he said, yes, that's how that works. I said, I don't think this is going to work. So I left. I went over to First Federal, sat down with Jim Snyder, and I explained the situation to him. And he said, you know, we don't do commercial loans. I said, oh, sorry. And he said, oh, don't go away. He said, we're going to talk about this. So we went through the process. He said, I'm going to take this to the board. A couple days later, he calls me up and he says, you got it. You guys were forward thinking at some level.
Yeah, at that time, we were not making commercial loans. We started a few, 4 or 5 years ago, 5 years ago, Evan, and making commercial loans. So we saw a need for it, and it's been very, very good. Other comments?
I'll do another one. At the hospital, that new addition was LEED certified. And that's because of you. You were the one that pushed that over the wall.
Thank you. Okay, thank you all very much, and I hope you enjoy the honeymoon.